So I hope it's okay that I have to leave that meeting a little bit early. I decided. Hello?
Test.
Hi. Did you know about Will? Pardon? Oh, you did? Paula and I went to see her at hospital. So we were there. We were there on Friday. At the hospice. She knew we were there. I told quite a bit of the time. I talked to her for a few times on the phone. And she was really with it at that time. But then, when she was
Hey,
in
all.
hospital.
Hi. I'm doing all right. How are you?
This is Pastor Praney's class, isn't it?
Pastor Prangy's class is upstairs in the sanctuary. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
Yeah. Hopefully that's good for him.
Hi.
Hopefully it goes well.
Hi.
Yes.
Hey, y'all. How you doing? Good. Hey, are you at Summers on Friday morning? Is that still where y'all meet? You and Pastor Prangy?
I would normally, but it's a conference,
Oh, okay. So you're not going to be there.
so I'm not going to be there now.
Okay. All right.
So, do you know where the New Life pens got off to?
My guess would be let's check around the Summers site in the storage room.
Okay.
I'll aim to remember to do that.
I'll go poke around.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Hi. How are you doing? What's that?
Just talking to myself.
Brisk night.
Not too bad.
I kept hoping I would see you, walk or something, but God will tell you.
Howdy. How you doing? Can't complain. No, I'm just giving a little time. Trying to set the culture of starting 3 minutes late, you know.
There you go.
Hi, how are y'all doing?
Hi. Thanks
Hi.
for waiting for us.
Yeah, you bet. I'm not usually a right on time kind of person anyway, so. Good evening. Is this going to be loud enough? My head's up here? Good? Okay. All right. So let's start like this evening. Talk either at your table or with someone nearby if you want to join tables with somebody else. And just something that stuck with you, something that stuck out to you from these pages we read for tonight, which was page 139 to 159. So shouldn't take too long. Just share one thing that's going to stick with you.
That's what I got out of this.
Ask me what?
Oh,
She wants to
I'm like,
know.
are we really in bad shape? Are we really declining? Are we really? I don't.
Did you come to the October
Oh, yeah.
joint thing we had at Shoreland? That
Oh, the
was
picnic?
2 years, not the picnic,
Oh,
2 years
2 years
ago.
ago.
2 years ago.
Did you ever come
No,
because she
no.
was working.
Okay, yeah, and so that was part of our kind of establishing the urgency and some of the statistical data as to why to do it.
The only thing I saw was Pastor Franny at Freedom's
Okay.
talking about.
If you saw him put up a graph, there was a very clear
Okay.
decline for all of us. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So there's some need. That's not to say we're in the worst shape now,
Yeah.
right? Especially that we're together now. We
Okay.
yep.
Well, you know, you're trying to get people to move.
Hi. How are you? You're here? Okay. Share something that was shared at your table or in your group, something that's going to stick with you. Raise your hand if you would, please, and share something that's going to stick with you.
The thing that stuck out to me was the fact that they reinforced the fact that we can't change people's hearts. So word of the gospel and that change management principles apply whether it's secular or the non-secular portion of it. They use the same techniques, you know, and then the big thing still is the means in which you motivate people to accept the change and then execute the change. So.
Yeah. Is there another hand?
Good, I must have read the right chapter.
Yes.
My takeaway was that there needed to be a sense of urgency
Okay.
from all of the different references. They all seem to drive home that point.
The healthy sense of urgency, right? Because there's also what were the words? Fabricated, destructive sense of urgency. Can we get a couple more? You can share yours or somebody else's. All right, seeing no one jumping to share. These three things, we're going to say a prayer about them. That God would give us the strength and the wisdom to work on these things as we continue moving forward as new life. Let's say a prayer. Gracious Father in heaven, we ask that through as we get ready to wrap this study up, that it will have been a blessing and that we will have learned things from it that are going to bring benefits for years to come. And some of the things we learned about this evening, we bring to you and ask for wisdom in how we move forward and how we approach them. Ultimately, we can't change people's hearts. We can lay reasons and data and the reality before people in a way that is loving and compassionate. But ultimately, it's the gospel that changes hearts. It's the gospel that opens eyes. And so we ask that you would help us to, above all else, be about that gospel, and that you would help us think carefully about our means, the means which we use to motivate, so that we might use gospel motivation as opposed to law motivation. And finally, Lord, we ask that you would help us to keep a healthy sense of urgency. Certainly we have we have the ultimate sense of urgency as Christians, knowing that your Son is coming back soon, and very soon. We ask that you would also help us to keep that urgency in front of our people, and also help us to look for other places to identify urgency and to keep it before us, to keep all of us moving forward. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so one quick thing. Our attendance taker, Pastor Newman, is out of town tonight. So I'm going to pass this around, if that's okay. And if you can mark down your name as being present, that's so we know who to send the link to the video to, the recording of the class for those who missed it. So. All right, starting on page 139. At the end, so we're on page 139 in the big book, and then in the small book, we are on the lesson that says before session 7, and it has tonight's date next to it, October 27th. So looking at page 139, first full paragraph, last sentence. From that means of grace perspective, church health is a blessing from God and a result of his work, not ours. At the same time, we also recognize that it is God who blesses our faithful efforts to make use of the principles and practices that better enable needed change to occur. So to that first one, I'll just talk through it. We play a role in the health or unhealthy culture of our church. You can kind of get points on both sides of the coin there, right? In the one sense, as the one sentence said, and it's correct, healthy culture and growth is from God and his work, not ours. At the same time, God has chosen us, he's chosen to give us the privilege of bringing the gospel to the world and of managing what you might call earthly churches here on earth. And so certainly from that human perspective, there are things we can do to help or hinder that process of facilitating a healthy culture. Agree or disagree? It is a good thing for us to research and read contemporary literature on how to strive for a healthy church culture. Let's do it this way. Can somebody just give me a reason why would it not be a good thing to research contemporary literature and take it all at face value? Yes.
Lose focus on what we're really trying to do as a church.
Yeah, there's a lot of research out there, and sometimes it can, people always argue, is the church a business or not, and there's different factors that go into that. But if we get too much into the literature and that's the only place our head is, then we can certainly lose focus, right, on what's our mission. And it's easy for us to get to this point where we're numbers obsessed, right? Is maybe a good way to phrase it. There's nothing wrong. Numbers can be a tool, but when we become numbers obsessed is when there starts to be a problem. On the other side of the coin, it is good to keep an eye on it. There's a number of tools, one of which we're going to talk about tonight, some of which have been brought up in this lesson, like demographic studies and thinking about how you're going door to door. It talked about surveys, maybe trying different approaches. So there is certainly a benefit in keeping tabs on the literature. All right, page 140. I simply wanted you to be able to highlight or note the 8 points that Cotter in the article Leading Change. And that article, if you wanted to look into it more, was in the back of the small workbook, so it was in Appendix C. Let's see here. This is kind of in the middle of the page on 140, right? So you had allowing too much complacency, failing to create a sufficiently powerful guiding coalition, If that sounds like a foreign language, all that means is that as you're working to, once you've identified the change that needs to be made and you're working to make that change, you have to gather people to be on board with it. We probably all, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it's my guess, because this is just how church goes. We've probably all experienced, right, the church is saying, well, what do we do, right? What do we do differently? And a few people come up with an idea, and they charge for it and try it, and it has mixed results, or it falls flat on its face, and that small group of people that was ready to try that new idea fizzles out, and the idea is dead in the water, right? So when we talk about a guiding coalition, it means before you can really make that movement, you have to bring people on board, so that there's a large enough group of people as that movement is made so that it can be something that sticks. All right, create a sufficiently powerful guiding coalition, understanding the power of vision, under communicating the vision, permitting obstacles to block the new vision, failing to create short-term wins, declaring victory too soon, and neglecting to anchor changes firmly in the culture. All right, let's take a look at the next 8 points. So still on page 140, we're now at the bottom of it, number 4 in our workbooks. The 8 points at the bottom of page 140 and 141 are items that address the fundamental errors that undermine transformation efforts. Take a moment to review the list and highlight the items you think we have been doing well, and write down the items you think we have failed to do. Basically, just take note of the things you think we've done well up to this point and the things that you think we have failed to do. And let's just take a couple minutes to talk with someone next to us on this one. So if you need a minute, and here's something else. Somebody told me, and then it didn't happen, that they would appreciate if we kept having name tags, because we're kind of a mixed group here, so I apologize to that individual who I told we were going to have name tags. I told Pastor Newman, and then he didn't bring them down, so let's blame it on Pastor Newman, because he's not here tonight, right? So at any rate, and whoever you're talking with in your group, just go ahead and remind each other your name, right? Just go ahead and state your name in the group, if you're sure you don't know. Okay, and then go through that list. Just quickly, what do you think we've done well? What do you think we've struggled with? Did we get them all?
I did, thank you.
All right, thank you.
This has been something long for me.
One of the things that in terms of what we've done well or not done well, depends on what we're talking about in terms of the transformation. You know, if it refers to the phase of combining as churches, there's several things, right?
Right.
But if it refers to that next phase, that's different. So, I don't know, what are we talking about? Which one are we talking about?
Well, you could talk about both scenarios, right? In my mind, I don't know if this is where you're headed, so maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but in my mind, leading up to, we did a decent job on a number of these.
Yeah.
Now we're in kind of a new phase,
Right.
Where the rubber's hitting the road. So we got work to do,
Yeah.
and we recognize it.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you probably
absolutely.
sensed it last night at the meeting, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of trying to figure out, so how do we do this thing?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, when we initially discussed it, we more discussed it from the point of when we combine.
Right.
But like if you look at these and if you're looking at kind of that next step,
Right.
probably none of them are done yet.
Right. If nobody else mentions that, will you?
Sure.
Okay, sounds good. Give you about 30 more seconds. All right, let's start to bring it back in. Can somebody throw out for the group? Can somebody throw out for the group something we have done well? Yes.
We were talking and establish a sense of urgency. So I think that's something everybody with the merger, that was communicated very well. And I think going forward, the sense of urgency, I don't think it's just for the churches, but I think the sense of urgency also that Jesus is coming and things are really getting urgent.
Yeah.
So that urgency that we need to share the word of God.
Yeah. So I heard you say leading up to the unification, the joining of the churches, we did a decent job, maybe arguably a good job of establishing.
Did an
Okay.
awesome job.
All right. Of establishing the sense of urgency.
Yeah.
I maybe heard you question now, how do we keep it, right? How do we keep it?
Well, we were talking about that, but then we were also talking about the wins, celebrating wins.
Mm-hmm.
And we did the first party that was really great. It was phenomenal. But how do we keep that going?
Yeah.
And how do we keep it with everybody together to celebrate those small wins?
Yeah. How do we celebrate the wins? We had the party. I think anyone who went said, well, that was really cool. And the goal is to make it better next year and to do a push to invite now, right? Now that our people have seen we're going to put time and effort into this, now invite somebody to it that you have in mind. But right, how do we communicate those wins that we're having? Because they are there, and so we have to figure out how to communicate them, right? The quarterly update videos, we're working to do it a little more, so we're working on it. But yeah, there's progress to be made for sure. Somebody else, something well, or go ahead and get in the mix, something not that we didn't do well, that we haven't done well. Go ahead.
This isn't quite either of those things.
Okay.
But we talked just a little bit about how right now we as a congregation seem to be more kind of plugging the holes and making sure the ship is floating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as we're coming together and starting to deal with some of the just day-to-day things of running a congregation from 4 different sites, and kind of that seems to, and from where I stand, it seems to be what we're focusing on right now. And maybe this is a good time to sort of sit back down and say, okay, what is our vision? Like,
Yeah.
we talked about it before the merger and during, and now that we've kind of gotten into the day-to-day running of things, maybe it's floated down a little bit on the to-do list.
Yeah.
And specifically, we were talking about like number 3 and 4, developing and communicating the vision. Like, we were like, we're pretty sure we know what the vision is, but we haven't heard it in a while.
Yep. So I've heard 2 people now say something leading up to this question could come into 2 different kind of phases. Leading up to the joining of our churches, we maybe did a good job on a number of these things. Now the question is, after the joining of our churches, how do we make sure these things don't slip through the cracks? And how do we?
Take a contrarian view.
Okay.
You know, I think that, you know, it's the 20 rule, but, you know, the rollout, the high presentation on the shoreline, I mean, there was a very small population there.
Mm-hmm.
When you take a look at the number of votes that were cast to, you know, approve the merger, really a small percentage in total to the congregation. So I think there's still a lot of people that are out there that still question, why did we do this? Why do we need to do this? Which goes to the communication part of it. But so I think with that, the sense of urgency was there for the right people that needed to move things forward.
Yep.
But I don't know that that sense of urgency has spread down, you know, throughout the congregations to make sure that everybody really understands, you know, what's occurred, what does it really mean
fair point. That's something we're talking about, the things that get said in the congregational meeting that we had last Thursday, was it? Things that get said in this class, we make note, and we're working on them, you know. We've brought up a number of times, it is extremely difficult to communicate in today's world because we live in, and we're just over-communicated to as individuals in today's world, if that makes sense. So that's one thing that makes it hard. Another thing that makes it hard is it seems like everybody has their preferred medium of communication. So these are obstacles that we have to keep wrestling with. How do we, you know, somebody brought up in a previous class, there's maybe some people we're leaving behind, you know, that aren't online, that haven't gotten so on and so forth. So just something I heard last night, we're working on compiling a list to make sure we're getting actual mailers to people who maybe aren't online, don't get email, and because of that aren't getting the New Life notes and weekly statistics and all that stuff. So we're working on it, yeah, but it is good. Thanks for bringing these things to us. Other things that we did well or are doing well or haven't. All right, so no hands shoot up. Let me see if I can come up with one. I think that if I had a, just a second, sorry, give me a moment. All right, keep your finger in your workbook at the page that you're on so that you don't lose it, and flip to the front cover, if you would, please. So I did have some objectives for this course. The surface level objectives were simply to help us start to understand this language of thinking and culture so that we can start striving with the help of God and by His grace for a healthier culture, and to have some tools to start assessing congregational health. Deeper level objectives would be that we start the process of gathering and motivating that guiding coalition for change. Also something that was brought up, that maybe there's some kind of vision and vision management committee that comes out of this, and I think we're going to get into that a little further into this lesson. And then number 3, lay out a plan for identifying and implementing needed changes in 2022 and beyond. I will say this, as I was preparing for this course this evening, kind of just thinking through where New Life is at, I thought to myself, I don't think we realized, I think we underestimated certain parts of what a big undertaking this joining of the churches was. Just all the crossing of the T's and the dotting of the I's, and that has taken a little longer than we thought, right? And there's a whole lot of people working on it behind the scenes. But the time is coming, and so that's part of the push for this course is to get us to start thinking, how do we start to do these very things that we're talking about? So one of our last lessons is going to be to that effect of having us think like a year out, where do we want to be, and what are the steps that we need to take to get there? So, all right, let's carry on. Number 5, page 141. We've touched on this one. Let's review. I would think all of our sites have tried various forms of vision, mission, core values, so on and so forth. How well did these things work in the past? I'll just answer that, and I'll say they had limited effect, maybe. I see a lot of heads nodding, very good. If they had limited impact, why might that be? Do we have that answer in our back pocket yet?
Excuse me, inward focus.
Inward focus could be a part of it, yep. You could take that in a number of directions. When these things were crafted, were we really crafting them with both our people and the outside world in mind, or were they just kind of crafted in a way to maintain the status quo, right? Other reasons that these things might have had a limited impact. Yes?
I think because the mission and vision wasn't shared well.
Mm-hmm.
Your church councils and your governing body discussed it, but it wasn't spread out and for the lay people to understand and share in.
Yeah, you have to not let it sit on the shelf to collect dust, right?
And I'd like to say something about the merger, about you not, looking at the big picture and that. But I think it took an awful lot of strength, faith, and trust in God. And maybe not looking at the big picture wasn't such a bad thing, because it might have been too much.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just seeing it's something that needed to be done and just going ahead and doing it and
Yeah.
having the faith that God's gonna take care of us.
Yeah.
And if everything's not perfect, we don't live in a perfect world.
Yeah. Not going to complain about that attitude. Yes.
Sometimes I think it's not viewed as an ongoing process, it's kind of one and done, okay, we set the vision, we communicate it, and then
Yeah.
pretty much we'll see how it's at.
There are things that have to be refreshed and revisited, and once you get to a point where they're all in existence and we're working to communicate and dedicate ourselves to them, both as leaders and our people, so that we absorb them and they become part of our life, mission, vision, core values, so on and so forth, everything in that realm. Then once you have the work done, you can get to a point where, okay, it's like every year, all right, we're going to take a look at this piece of it. Instead of, hey, we have this whole mountain of things to look at, right? And then next year, we're going to take a look at this piece of it. We're going to take a look at this piece of it. If there were a vision committee, right, that would be kind of how they would operate once they got the mountain of work done initially. Yes?
There's never really an effort on a yearly basis or whatever to say, how well do we do executing against our mission and our vision?
Mm-hmm.
And that retrospective look often is critical to define what you haven't done well and where you really need to focus. And I at least didn't see that was really being done.
Yeah, a review process, I think, is maybe something that we've struggled with, right? How do we, you got to have a semi-healthy culture before you can do kind of a review process, because there has to be that understanding that we're not tearing into each other here, but we're working together to say, how do we better, how did we do on that, how do we better it, right? So to think in those terms and to set up opportunities to do reviews, kind of like the Pixar Brain Trust, if anyone remembers that illustration where they just kind of shred the movie, but it comes out as a much better product. Did you have a hand going up? Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was true here, but just in other places that I've been and experienced this, I think everybody is trying to make something that everyone can agree with, and so what you end up with is something that's, watered down or so high level that no one can object to it, but it also doesn't really impassion people to do something with it. So it becomes something that, like, okay, yeah, I agree with that, but it's not actually empowering me or like inspiring me to do something.
Right. Yeah. So if you get too general, right, things get kind of watered down and convoluted, and you kind of lose your sense of direction, right? And you're going in too many directions. Anything else? Yes.
As I've gone through all this reading and the conversation we've had, I think the one thing that is shown to us is that, our evangelism efforts were, well-intentioned, but very narrowly focused. We were happy if we could get 6 people with door hangers, or, we thought, well, okay, we're out there doing it. But I think, when we take a look at the reading of the material that's done to get that change culture and who we're trying to go after, I mean, this redefines evangelism in a manner that I don't think that we're familiar with from
Right.
experience.
Yeah. So we're gonna practice it. We're gonna work on it. And the question I've been asking people to start thinking about is, I know my guess would be there are people rearing to go when it comes to, all right, we're this new entity. Let's go, knock on doors or whatever we've done in the past. And I say, well, that's good, but we should also be asking the question, thinking about the content we've studied here. Are we ready for people to walk in the doors? When a new face shows up, are we ready to make sure they feel like this is a warm, inviting place, like they're welcome? Are we ready to, do we have systems in place? How do we follow up with them? All those kinds of things, right? So it's outreach, in my mind, is a much bigger picture than we've traditionally treated it as. Anything else? All right. Let's see, bottom of the page there. People change what they do less because they are given analysis that shifts their thinking than because they are shown a truth that influences their feelings. Another way to say this might be, as we work to communicate our vision, we need visuals and stories that show people the benefit of that vision. Didn't ask you to do anything here, but just another pitch, right, for the quarterly video updates that we're trying to do. That's one of those places that we're trying to show people, right, the original vision starting to work. And so share with, I guess this is my pitch here, share with your pastors, your congregational leaders, when you see a new life win, you might say, share it, right? It encourages them. Share it with others if you get the chance. And as we have those stories come in, we're going to look to pick some of them up and share them a little more widely. All right, flip the page. Let's see, I kind of gave an example of some things we have done to show people some things that are working. We've already had a discussion on, from here on out, we need to get going on vision and direction and so on and so forth, right? So we've got some work to do there. And I'm hoping some in this class are going to be some of those who help us do that. All right, number 7, page 141. In class, I will explain the concept and power of having more things pointing in the same direction. I won't draw anything. It'll just be distracting. If you're in a canoe with 3 people, and you've got one person not rowing, one person rowing forwards, and one person rowing backwards, what's going to happen? You're going to go nowhere, right? So maybe I will draw something now. Right? Imagine that's an arrow. So our goal when it comes to church is to have more and more things pointed in the same direction and moving in the same direction, as opposed to things pointed in all different directions, right? And that's how we're going to start to gain traction, more and more traction, and more momentum. And one of the simple ways that at least I have been doing what I can to communicate it, and now I'll share it with you so that you can work to communicate it with others. We want everything we do to line up with our mission statement, which is a good mission statement: to grow, connect, and serve. New Life exists to help you grow in the understanding and application of God's Word, to connect you with a larger body of brothers and sisters in Christ, and to equip you to serve the community in love. So that's our mission statement. If we can start to internalize it and use it as kind of a guiding line as we evaluate each and everything. Is this program, is this effort helping us uphold one of our 3 missional pillars of either grow, connect, or serve? And if it's not, either A, it needs to be retooled, B, we need to revisit, maybe think about dropping it and seeing if there's something else we can do in place, or C, just figure out what needs to be done with it. How do we line it up with our mission of grow, connect, and serve, so that we can uphold those pillars and carry them out? Is that tracking? All right, so now you know, right? Spread the message far and wide. Our goal is to line everything up with grow, connect, and serve, so that we start to get that traction with more things pointed in the same direction. All right, 142, number 8. There it is. Middle of the page. Cotter defines destructive false urgency as frantic, energetic activity that flows from a fear of losing and is characterized by anger and anxiety, whereas constructive, true urgency focuses on critical issues and is driven by a deep determination to succeed. Leading up to the reunification, we've touched on this. We worked to create a sense of urgency. So we won't touch on that again. We created the sense of urgency. Did we do anything poorly? Let's have that evaluation. We talked about good. When it comes to creating a sense of urgency leading up to the joining of the churches, did we do anything poorly? Yes?
I would say potentially communication to that group of members who do not have the emails and the social media.
Yeah. So the communication struggle. Yeah. Yes?
I think that the central urgency of the petition in the Lord's Prayer, let thy kingdom come, is that urgency is to spread the gospel. And we need to make that more personal, to just say that we need to spread the gospel. There's absolutely true. We need to spread the gospel. But to whom are we spreading it? What person do you know that needs to hear it? What friend do you have that doesn't really know what you're about? To look for the opportunities to bring souls to Christ as best we can through the gospel. And the urgency of individuals is what really would drive us more. If we knew a bunch of people who say, you believe that stuff? Or you believe in myths? Yeah, that's a crutch that you believe in, whatever the things are. Are there people like that in your life? And I would word wager that everybody here knows somebody to some degree who really needs to hear the gospel. How are we motivating each other to grab a hold of that concept and say, that's a person going to hell unless I do something? That's what I consider real urgency in this whole business of communicating together as one church out of 3 units. That's, I think, the burning issue. No pun intended.
Yep, very good, right? So you're, to summarize, you're talking about, so we have the divine instruction from God, go and make disciples of all nations. We know that Jesus is coming back soon and that all people will stand before their Maker. But how do we maybe contextualize that for us as individuals? So what does that mean for me as an individual, and how I'm going to live and act, and how I'm going to seek to work with those people and draw others closer to Christ? All right. Well, maybe you answered our next question for us. What can we do to keep a constructive sense of urgency before our people right now? I think it's that. We do got to get to a point, and we're getting there, right? It'll come. We got to get to a point where we say, all right, what does it look like to do personal evangelism, to do friendship evangelism, and how do we equip our people, right? Rather than just simply stand in the pulpit and say, beat in the pulpit and say, tell others about Christ, tell others about Christ, is part of the problem, part of the fault, on the church with the leadership. How do we work to equip our people and set our people up to be able to do those things? So there's a full picture to look at even as we work to create that sense of urgency. How do we do a better job of it?
I'd offer this, that I'm not speaking of a higher position on that subject. I am just as guilty as anybody when it comes to making sure I identify someone who needs to hear the gospel, and I go to try to do that. I'm as bad as anybody else. I need that motivation.
Yeah. Thank you for the comment of humility. I think we can probably all say it, right? Yeah.
Doesn't it start with your friendship
Yep.
evangelism, building the relationships?
Yep, the tried and true, if we're going to look at the data, friendship evangelism is king and has yet to be dethroned, right? Always looking to bring more into the circle of people that you care about and into the circle of people that you go out of your way to show acts of love and kindness to, so that you can deepen relationships and have the opportunity to say, hey, come to this thing my church is doing. Hey, come hang out with this group of friends. We're getting together and I want you to meet them. All right, number 9. The figure on page 144. I know that collectively we have the people to create a vision and planning team. What would be the value of forming such a team? Did anyone have any questions on this little triangle? Was it confusing? It tracked? All right. What is the value? It seems like we're getting a lot of vision discussion tonight. What would be the value if one of the great things that came out of this was we had a guiding coalition here that said, boy, we need to be thinking about vision. We need to be thinking about 10 years down the road How are we going to win anyone over to what we're trying to do if there's no plan in place, right? If there's no roadmap for the next 10 years, should God allow that to be the plan, right? We always leave room for that. So what would be the value in it?
It's forward thinking.
Forward thinking? Yes?
Might take some of the weight off of the pastors and the councils and the people who have to keep the day-to-day stuff going. Yeah, I was looking at that.
Yeah, it would help to spread the work around a little bit so it's not all falling on the shoulders of certain individuals who maybe aren't in that realm of talents and passions, right? I'll sit around and have philosophical conversations up in the clouds. What do we want things to look like 10 years from now? I'll do it all day long, right? It excites me and fills me up, but some people are just like, ugh, when it comes to that, right? So something else you were going to add?
Well, it'll give other people in the church a part in it. You know, when you spread it out and get talents of everyone in the congregations, I think you get a lot of buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
And that also helps reinforce your mission and vision too.
Yeah. Helps to get buy-in as you have a plan and then start to disseminate that plan and get people on board with the plan, and you have more and more people working towards the plan. The next thing you know, more and more of us are headed in the same direction, namely towards that plan, and it certainly increases buy-in. Yeah. Any other comments? Do I have any fellow dreamers in the room? No. All right, let's see, number 10 here. Page 147, we started to talk about this, whether you knew it or not. Ken and I were dancing around it just a little bit. Agree or disagree, it is sufficient for a church to have Matthew 28 as its mission statement, go and make disciples of all nations. I'll just talk through this one a little bit. On the one hand, sure, it could be sufficient. That's ultimately what our mission is. That is the mission as Jesus handed it down to us. Go and make disciples. And so may that, Matthew 28, always be on our hearts and minds. But there also, and it's not to say that it's bad, it's good. It's the Word of God. Also, we have to ask the question, now what about in our context? Right? How are we going to put this into play in our exact context? And so often when it comes to mission statements, we're going to want them to be a little more focused than just writing down Matthew 28, the last few verses, right? We want them to be a little more focused, a little more contextualized, so we know this time, this place in my life, in the life of my brothers and sisters in Christ, what does it look like specifically to carry out Matthew 28? What does it look like more specifically to carry out Matthew 28? All right, I would think this one's going to be easy. Page 147, number 11. Explain the statement. The things a church decides not to do are as important as the things they decide to do. Would anyone like to explain it? Yes?
Because if you decide not to do something, you're not gonna waste your energy, your time, your money, people, talents, etc. And also, it also helps define, I mean, maybe there's really, really good reasons why you're not gonna do it, in terms of, is it in alignment with your mission and your vision? Is it in alignment even with God's calling all of us?
Yep. Yep. Anyone want to add? Yes?
It encourages the need for you to look at everything you can in order to get your plan together to get started. If you don't look at everything, there may be some things that are really important. I mean, within your power, of course. We're not omniscient, but the idea of saying, this is important, that's important, without really looking at it is not a good idea. You need to look at some things that you can, as was said, that you're not going to use.
Yeah, yeah. Anything to add from anyone? Yep.
Well, I was just going to say that when a congregation decides not to do something or do something, it's good. You talked about having a healthy review process.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in enough congregations where when something that you want to do is not done, then all of a sudden it's like, well, it's a personal or vice versa, they want that, you know, so a congregation having a healthy review, so that this is the reason why we're not doing it, or this is the reason we're doing it, is as important as anything.
Yeah, and to have that mission statement not sitting on the shelf collecting dust, and to have our vision laid out, and to have it specific, and to have the steps it's going to take from now till 10 years from now to get there, helps us with that process, right? Of saying, this, we maybe want to do this, but are we starting to get some mission creep, is what it's called, as opposed to staying on our path. And that doesn't mean you want to shoot everything down right away. You want to be open to flexibility, and you want to be flexible enough with the help of God to recognize if there's a ministry opportunity somewhere. But also everything has a cost. So Apostle Paul said he aims to be all things to all people. That is a great statement for us to contemplate and internalize as individuals as we work as the body of Christ. When it comes to the church, what that ends up meaning is the church does all things, and that never works out, right? We've probably all seen a congregation where it had a focus, it had a mission, and then things got bigger, they got more complex, and then before you know it, people start going a whole bunch of different directions, and church kind of loses its focus as there's all these programs that are kind of detached appendages to the congregation, and it ends up kind of draining the health of the congregation over time. You had a hand up.
Yeah, in the context of focus and mission, you set up 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year goals, and you want to take those in order. You don't want to be working on 10-year goals when you haven't done your 3-year goals.
Mm-hmm. Yep. To get to the 10-year, you got to get to the 3-year, right? So you got to, that's the plan. All has to be linear and headed in the same direction leading up to. Yes?
So I have a concern about this that I'm not able to articulate so well, so I'll give it a try.
All right, let's do it.
How do you do this, which is good to get everybody kind of going in the same direction, but maintain empowering everybody to be their own missionary, let's say. So make it so that people are still like, oh, you want to have a Bible study in your house? Go and do a Bible study in your house. You want to get people together and do some music for church without being asked by the music director to do it? Like, just go do it and then come let us know and we'll plug you in somewhere. How do you make sure, because getting everybody in the same direction is good, but also it seems like if you take it a click in the wrong direction, it's like, well, the committee didn't say we could do that, so we're not going to do that. Or we have to wait till the next meeting to get that done.
Oh, I see. So kind of getting bogged down in the institutional side of things, is that what you're getting at a little bit? Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can answer it fully, but I'll give it a shot. I think that we're set up in a good position, which I'm excited about here at New Life. I've used this phrase before, and I'll use it again because I want us to remember it. I think that all of our individual sites alone had kind of become, fallen into kind of this deer in the headlights syndrome. See the world changing around us so quickly, and we don't know what to do, and what do we do about it? And before you know it, as we're going to talk about in just a moment, when a congregation is more aged, they kind of get decision paralysis, so on and so forth. Long story short, we've tried to set ourselves up nicely here at New Life now. There's a group of people that is taking care of kind of the bureaucratic type things, and it's intended to enable the ministry board, for example, and the leaders at each site to not have to worry about those things, not have to think about those things, and have the freedom to just go out and do ministry. Did that help at all? No.
So how that seems like the people who are in charge of ministry, but how do you empower just lay people who might have a particular passion for a particular thing to use that passion?
Okay. I've got somebody who looks like they want to jump into the conversation.
I don't know if I can answer the question, but I would make the distinction between what is the church doing as a group and what do we agree to focus on versus what individuals are doing. And that becomes a function of leadership. That's where we struggle as a church, is we don't capitalize on people's talents.
Yep.
And we all can't do the same thing,
Yeah.
if there's a need within the church that maybe isn't part of the overall mission, there might be people within the church that could carry out that piece on an individual level and coordinate that effort without getting in the way of the church.
Yeah, yeah. And to just kind of add a similar thought as I'm trying to think through it here on the spot. I think once we have the mission, the vision ironed out, once we keep polishing those things, I think there's going to be a fair amount of room for some autonomy. You know what I mean? And when it comes to, somebody wants to get a group together in their home, and they want to do a Christian book study or an in-home Bible study. I mean, I would hope that as a larger congregation, we're doing that at some point in the future. Okay, does it line up with Grow? Go and do it. Yeah, be part of the team that makes it happen. Is this helping at all? Go ahead.
I think too, the more I think about it and the more I listen to it, it does come back to also the culture of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't know what our mission is, I'm a little hesitant to jump up and say, well, I'll do this because I don't know if everyone's on the same page. Like, do I have to ask a committee? Is this something that's okay for me to do? But when the culture of the church is, we are all pulling together towards one mission, and we have discussed this, or it has been made public, like this is okay, or the committee, whatever it is. If the culture is accepting and you feel safe doing it, people are going to start jumping out and doing things because they know it's all right.
Right, establishing a culture of permission, right? I think that the permission to do. And there's some things that kind of have to be done on our side. Maybe this is a slightly different topic, but people wanting to jump in and volunteer, if they have a framework for what they're supposed to do, they actually feel more free in helping, as opposed to, here, you go do this. Right, so it does come down, I think, once our mission and vision is ironed out and we have practiced, how do we stick to it? How do we implement it? I think then the options for autonomy and individuals stepping up and doing things will increase. Interesting question. I'll keep thinking about it. Sound good? Yes?
I just want to say that I hope that we can also approach it with the expectation that not everything is going to be perfect.
Yep.
And we should we should try some things out
Yep.
and allow people to try things, even if we say, okay, well, that didn't quite go the way we thought it would.
Yep.
We shouldn't put so much pressure on everything has to be perfect before we do it. Otherwise,
Yep.
we're kind of also wasting time.
Yeah. Yep.
Which we don't have. But
Agreed. Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and this is part of this is another component which kind of comes into play with this graph I've drawn up here. There's such a thing as kind of a young church mentality and an old church mentality. And in a young church mentality, you really have that ingrained. It's kind of like, let's just throw food at the wall and see what sticks kind of deal, right? Once you get to that old church mentality, oh, we better discuss this through and through, and then the idea is dead, after 2 weeks of discussion, and nothing happens. So, yeah, thanks. Did you have a hand? No? Okay. Scratching your head. All right, very good. Page 148. I'll just go through these. I told you to just take note of them, but here we have an example of someone took what was going on in Nehemiah's rebuilding project in the Old Testament and kind of laid out some of the things that he did as he went about working to implement those changes. Nehemiah was greatly burdened for his people in his home city. Nehemiah's burden led him to prayer. God turned Nehemiah's burden for Jerusalem into a vision. As Nehemiah prayed, he also planned. Nehemiah took several risks in pursuing his vision. Nehemiah gathered the leaders to cast his vision and challenged them to join him in fulfilling the mission. Nehemiah knew he couldn't rebuild the walls himself, and Nehemiah remained focused on his vision in spite of opposition. And then in the paragraph below, the last few lines, an obvious problem, a positioned person, a strategic plan, a powerful God, a God-honoring purpose, a blessing to people. Just worth highlighting, so you can pull it back up. All right, we've talked about 13 before. When you got momentum, doors open. We'll leave it there. This one was interesting. Page 152. Made me think a little bit. Maurer, how do you say his name? Maurer? We're going with Maurer. All right. Maurer lays out 3 levels of resistance we will encounter when we try to enable needed change. How might you work with somebody who shows a level 1, 2, or 3 resistance? So I will read this. It's on page 152. Level 1 is, I don't get it. We've talked about there may be still some people around New Life now who are kind of level 1. I don't get it, you know. So how do you work with somebody that is in the I don't get it stage? So the first hand go up was Ken.
You need to be able to show them that there is a need large enough to mobilize to work against. That's important. If they don't see an objective, then obviously they're going to say, I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they need to see an objective. Did you have a hand?
You have to give them information that they will see as benefiting them.
Mm-hmm. Information that they will see as benefiting them. Are there any other hands? Yeah, this one is communication is key, right? I don't get it. Just helping people to understand, as our source says here, explains that level 1 resistance, I don't get it, is the easiest to overcome because all people need at this level is additional accurate information. And sometimes you can provide all the information, and we got to recognize this too. You can provide all the information you want. You can over-communicate. There might still be some people who say, I don't get it, right? Leading up to the merger. And we see the decline, we see the reality, right? And we say, we need to start working together sooner rather than later while we still have the strength to do so. And you may lay those things before some people, and some people might still say, I don't get it. So we have to recognize that, right? And we might just have to work in compassion and say, well, I'm happy to continue the conversation. Another thing that I think when it comes to I don't get it, and sometimes even I don't like it, is to just be a positive person yourself, you know? Hey, I know that bringing these churches together, we've had some challenges. Challenges with communication, challenges with figuring out where all the pieces fit and how all the roles are going to shake out and exactly what it's all going to look like. But there's already some really cool things that have happened, like this, for example, or like that, for example. And I know we're going to get there if we keep trusting in God and His goodness, and if we keep inspiring more people to join the team and be part of the mission. Don't underestimate the power of letting that positivity rub off on others. All right, I don't like it is more complicated, as first full paragraph on page 152 says. People may have adequate information, but they still don't like the proposed change. Maurer explains, level 2 resistance is an emotional reaction to the change. It is based on fear. Level 2 runs deep, making communication more difficult, and meeting people at level 2 takes courage. Overcoming this type of resistance requires discovering what is causing the fear and respectfully addressing it. I wouldn't be surprised if there are people, right, that are struggling with this right now, the I don't like it thing. And, we've got 6 pastors, and how do we connect those pastors to have those conversations? In addition, how can you be somebody who kind of helps nudge them in the right direction, right, as we maintain that positive attitude? If you hear someone complaining or just kind of griping or whatever, we already talked about it. Yes?
That's what I was going to say. I think when it comes to level 2, and even level 1 a little bit, it's the relationships you have with those people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people that I've heard that don't like it are the ones who have been lifelong members.
Mm-hmm.
This is where they were baptized. We're losing. And it doesn't matter what I say because I've literally only been here 5 years.
Yeah.
But having somebody who has been there and experienced it, who sees it, holds a whole different weight.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So I think relationships can really help with level 2 and even level 1.
Right. Yeah. Relationships are key, right? And that's why you look at, if you were to map the web of relationships when it comes to pastors, the leadership, the members, all the people at New Life, there's going to be, if maybe you have somebody in mind who has just kind of, how do I say this in a nice way? Just kind of, continually swatted and taken pot shots at the whole process. And you're someone who has a relationship, you might be closer to them than one of the pastors are. And it might be your positive spirit and speaking with them and saying, hey, we want you on board for what we're doing. We're trying to do something new here. How can you help us and be part of the team?
I think too with the level 2, I don't like it in our specific situation, the people that are struggling with the merger, the loss of something familiar and comfortable can be really hard, even if you know that maybe it wasn't what was needed.
Right.
Even if you know that what you had for so many years or what you've been used to for so many years maybe isn't the best way, letting that go and seeing that maybe in their eyes fade away, maybe forever, who knows, can be really scary.
Yeah.
And so even people that maybe see it as a needed thing still might not like it because they're losing that fear. And there's, to some extent, even if they have all the information, that might just take time.
Right, yeah.
For them
To process that fear, right? Because there's fear of change ultimately comes down to fear of losing something you hold dear, right? And on the one hand, if we're going to be kind of factual about the matter, why are you holding to something earthly, right? But we're going to be a little more gentle and compassionate in that conversation, right? But I do appreciate how Hein puts it in his presentation when he came on that 1 October, leading up to the unification. I think the line that sticks out, if you're there, maybe you remember it, he talked about, why are you clinging to that thing, that why are you afraid of and clinging to this thing that the angels are going to be back and they're going to set it on fire not too long from now, right? Like, so kind of a smart aleck way. Don't use that if you're working with somebody. Please don't use that. I do not give you permission. We use compassion, right? We use that gospel motivation. All right, level 3, I don't like you. Even more challenging to overcome is level 3 resistance. I don't like you, which often includes a lack of trust or confidence either in the person proposing the change or in the one that person represents, even though the change itself is not opposed and may actually be liked. So a lot of these things, from what I've read and from what I've seen, once we start to iron some more things out, we have been working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Once we start to iron some more things out and get vision, get a plan, continue to highlight those wins, some of which we've already had, and I have full confidence they're going to keep coming. Just the evidence of those things happening might start to move some people out of these phases. A lot of times when it comes to a big change being made, you might have some people that it ruffles their feathers, and our game plan is to work in compassion and in love with them, but to stay the course. And in time, many of those people, when they start to see, oh, it's working, this was a good idea, they start to then kind of turn their position on it and warm up to it. Okay. Number 15, page 153. Pastors and leaders are often the ones that receive the worst of such opposition. How can you encourage your pastors and leaders as they encounter such opposition? We've talked through a couple things already. Has anyone got another one? One of the things, for example, that we talked about is you, right? Not just the pastors, not just the leaders, but each of us, now that there are many of us starting to have this conversation, each of us being one of those positive forces for change, being part of that guiding coalition that acts and moves with love and compassion and patience. Anything else?
I don't know.
Yes.
I think as we grow and, we go to certain churches and you said, go ahead and branch out.
Mhm.
I think if you move around to churches and you get used to seeing more faces that you're not used to, I think that each of us can be that positive force,
Mhm.
as we spread our love for our Savior and New Life.
Yep.
So I'm one that I feel guilty if I don't go to my services. So, and that's just the way I was raised, but I'm trying to change that, just communicate with your pastor and say,
Mhm.
hey, I'm not gonna be there, I'm going to a different service, or,
Yep.
something like that. But I think that's real important to
Yeah.
start spreading our wings a little bit.
Start intermingling a little bit. I've really appreciated getting to go to each of the sites and to meet people as they come in the doors. I think it's been really cool. And I've been encouraging you to do it if you've been doing that homework item. So to be able to go around and meet other people, I think we need some of that intermingling as we start to recognize each other's faces. All right, yes.
I was just gonna say, tell them when things go well. Tell them when you like things. I think, maybe we talked about it here. I don't remember if it was here or somewhere else, but sometimes the naysayers are the loudest voices, even if they're the smallest group.
Yeah.
It can seem like the people that have complaints and have issues and are constantly negative fill up your brain space, and that's all you can think about. So tell your leaders when things go well, because you might think to yourself like, oh, they probably know. Well, it's still good to hear, and it's good to hear that encouragement so that they don't get bogged down by the people coming at them with all of the other things that they don't like.
Bring them the good. Yeah, thanks. All right, seeing no other hands. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for number 16 here. So page 154, when you looked at that half circle and tried to read about it, were you just kind of like, what in the world is going on? No? All right, we understood it. All right, maybe all right, good. So this this comes in many different shapes and forms. This is called the life cycle of a congregation. One of the simplest ways of understanding it that I have come across is in a book that is listed in your at the front of your workbook under resources. It's the one called The Unstuck Church. It's got some good things in it. It's got some not great things in it, but the tool inside it is the most helpful thing. So I know you can't see this, but right, it's a bell-shaped curve, and you've got launch. So this is a young congregation. And then you've got momentum growth. This is when the congregation is a little more established and they start to grow just a bit. Strategic growth. Up top you have sustained health, kind of the pinnacle of the church's life cycle. And then once a church starts to decline, even once it gets into this maintenance and it's already declining, you may not even notice it in attendance or offerings just yet, but the church is already in this kind of precarious place where it's starting to decline and it enters maintenance mode. And then you get to preservation and you get to life support. Let's see, what do I want to say about this? So we have one effort that is on the front side of this right now. Basically, depending on which half of this bell-shaped curve you are at, you have completely different struggles. And you have completely different things that you need to focus on. We have one effort of New Life, which is Reach, which is really kind of still in the launch phase. The rest of our congregation, the rest of our sites are somewhere in here between maintenance, preservation, and life support. And this is, I'm kind of throwing a lot at you. And maybe you won't pick it all up, but maybe you'll pick some of it up. And I would think that we'll be using this tool a little more as we get to some evaluation. But kind of in a general sense, what happens as you start to creep down this backside of the church's life cycle is you need to kind of break the cycle and start to move things upward again. And at each stage, there's kind of a specific list of things you need to consider. And kind of the basics is that the further down you go, the more change is needed. For example, by the time you get down to life support, basically you need to embrace a brand new vision you need to relaunch your congregation. So by the time you're at life support, it's time to rally the troops and say, God did a wonderful thing here at this place, and He touched many lives, but it's time for us to go in an entirely new direction. And for us to have future kingdom impact, we're going to have to embrace a bold new vision, maybe shut the doors, relocate, hand the keys over to a different ministry or a different church and let them come in and operate, right? So those are kind of the grandest things that must be done once you're down on life support. And that's kind of a general rule as well. Once you're able to identify where a congregation is and how far they are down this backside, to kind of reverse the trend, you need to start thinking about the things that are on this side. So I know this is a lot that I'm throwing at you. Yes?
Question, when you're in the business world and people leave, you have exit interviews and you find out why people have left.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that has been done with the leadership of the church to actually do that when you start to see a number of people leave and find out, if it's not just typical, you're moving to a different state or whatever, but, to find out the why?
To my knowledge, it has not been done. Yeah. Not a bad thing to consider, though, certainly. You got more you want to follow up on that?
We saw a big loss of some people who had been part of the congregation long before before we even joined, which was over 20, years ago. And I just think when you see folks leaving that are that established, it's different than a person who's maybe been there 6 months and they're still kind of feeling it out and then they're going someplace else. But, it's really important to understand the whys.
Yep.
So that you can prevent that bleed.
Right, yeah, very much so. So I'm not going to speak to the specifics of the situation you're talking about, but you jogged my memory for a couple more things that apply up here. We have talked before about how visionaries and dreamers are often some of the first people to leave a congregation because, let's see, what do we say? They can just kind of sense. There's kind of this sense, right, that things aren't headed in the right direction. There's kind of this sense when they have tried and maybe they don't know how to articulate it or how to properly cast a good vision and win people over. But hey, I tried to help and it just kind of fell flat. Nobody cared to hear what I had to say, so I'm out of here, right? And so oftentimes you have kind of leaders and visionaries that are interested in, hey, how do we maybe think about some changes that need to be made? How do we evaluate the health of our congregation? And they kind of leave in waves, and then more and more people leave as you go further down this. And one of the difficult things is that so often once a church gets into maintenance, they need to make a certain amount of changes. They need to make fairly big changes, and they needed to make them yesterday, right? So they definitely need to make them today. The kind of the catch-22 is that by the time you get down into like preservation, for example, you have more and more people say, hey, what's going on here? We got some problems. We got to start evaluating this. And they're ready to make the changes that they needed to make up here. We'll make these changes and try, but then they kind of fail and they don't work. And then by the time you get to life support, people are ready to try all these changes, right? But nothing's working because the culture and the lifeblood of the congregation has deteriorated too far. But it would definitely be a worthwhile thing to have something like an exit interview. My guess is that has kind of been personalized to a certain extent with pastor, having a congregation with pastor, for example. Hey, we're looking to leave, and maybe pastor just says, hey, why? What's that about? So my guess would be that maybe there should be a formalized process. It might be a healthy thing to have a more formal process, but it's been more of kind of a individual person-by-person basis.
I don't believe that members of the church actually come to the pastor and say, hey, we're thinking about leaving. I think they just kind of fall away and
Yeah.
start going someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever knows what happened to them.
Right.
And my second point is verbiage is very important, and people are resistant to change. So perhaps you could start alternating the word maybe
Improvements.
instead of just change.
Okay.
Because a lot of it would be improvements.
Right, right. Improvement, new direction, new effort. Yeah. Revitalization. Guess there's a whole cache of words, right? Right, yeah. Other questions on this? It's kind of a lot to internalize, but it's a tool that might be handy for us as we get further into kind of analysis at each site and working to lay the path forward, because the further down you go, there's kind of a specific set of things you need to think through in order to work to bring the specific group back to the other side, which is the ideal side. Yes?
Is it flipping on things? So if you're in the preservation mode, do you try to get back to the exact opposite line of momentum growth? Is that good?
As a general rule of thumb, if this piqued anyone's interest, there is this resource in your book, and you can probably find some more reading for it online. And let's see here. As a general rule of thumb, yes. The things that you're working in the launch phase, when you're in the life support, you got to shut it down and you got to relaunch in the launch phase. When you're kind of in the preservation phase, you probably want to be retooling, maybe scrapping a number of systems that have just kind of deteriorated and are dilapidated. And you need to be asking, probably some stuff from all three are going to apply, but I would say there's definitely going to be some crossover. So there is a certain amount of crossover, yeah. Any more questions on this? All right. I will give you 2 minutes to write down on your to-do list something from this evening. That's in the very back of the book. Our New Life to-do list. What did you take away from this class? That once we get that vision committee formed, there's one for you, right? Get that vision planning going. Get that vision committee. Start to think about some of those things to lay out the roadmap so that we can start to onboard people. And I'll give you another minute to write down anything else. All right, and then let me get this out there before you pack up and head out. Notice the homework for session 8, skip chapter 4. So don't just keep plowing ahead. Skip chapter 4. It was, because this was his doctoral project. This was kind of like just the mechanics of his project. So make sure to jump to page 181. Project conclusions. So it's chapter 5. When you do your homework, make sure to jump to chapter 5, page 181. There's a few more practical things in there for us. Don't forget, try to visit a couple other services when you get the opportunity to do so. And then start thinking about, just for yourself, what does the next year look like for New Life? And how do we start to lay it out and form that vision, not just for 1 year, but for 3, for 5, and for 10. Let's say a prayer. Gracious Father in heaven, thank you for our opportunity to continue our study this evening. We ask that it would bear fruit as we continue to kind of learn this language and how to assess and how to keep you at the center as we do that. We ask that you would give us compassion in our hearts. There are many who saw the need for change and who move forward to make that change happen. And we ask that you would equip each of us, whether we're pastors or not, to work with people compassionately, to be that Christ-positive spirit in their life that is focused on the joy that we have in Christ, and to encourage them and to invite them to come along on this new journey on which we are embarking. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
If I may,
Yes?
the email I got most recently gave a listing of all kinds of things that are going on in all of our different campuses, but one, including all of the different educational things that are available.
Mm-hmm.
In that list, I remember there was one that was specifically for the ladies that would like to go. I'd like to remind the men here that this is left out of that list of educational opportunities, and that is once a month, there is a Bible and Bacon that's held for men. And that's held at the first Saturday in October, or in the month, every month, and it's held in the basement of our South Campus. We're starting a new, I have to apologize, we're starting a new subject this next month, and I didn't realize I was going to have this opportunity to present it, and I haven't settled on it yet. So, but there will be a new topic starting the first Saturday in November. So I'd encourage the men, if you're interested, please, 8:30 Bethany, first Saturday of the month.
That's $1 in the swear jar. So once
We do serve bacon. It's called Bible
first
and Bacon. You'll have some bacon.
first Saturday of the month, 8:30 in the South Campus basement, which was formerly Bethany. Ken, I would say make sure to email Pastor Newman so that gets on the communication.
Thank you. I'll talk to you in a moment.
All right.